for me, this was a very special project. First of all, I never co-authored any book with anyone. And so my first experience being a co-author is with Heather. I mean, like the one and only Heather. So I'm very excited.
Well, I
It
was
was
so
a great
excited that
honor.
you agreed to do it. And then I think we were talking about kind of our schedules. And so this is basically a year ago we wrote it, right? It was in the fall, like as far as drafting it all.
Yeah.
And we both agreed. I'd have to go back to our original emails, but was it November that we started really diving into it? Maybe
I
end of
believe
October.
so. Yeah. And
And I
it
remember
was so
thinking,
fast. Yeah.
that we just, and it was so easy to work with you because you just said, I'm just going to set this time aside and just focus on this, even though I knew you were really busy and we had different projects going on, before and right after. But one thing that really helped me is that we just kind of set up a spreadsheet, and for me to kind of visually see, okay, what chapters are we going to be working on and how to divide them up. And also, I mean, it wasn't like totally perfect. Like we didn't stick with it 100%. Sometimes we were like, wait a minute, we need 2 chapters in this spot, or,
Right.
Something had to be shifted around. So
Yeah. Well, Heather, I really appreciate you showing me how to actually envision or have this layout, because you have the spreadsheet of each chapter and what each chapter, and I was more of a pantser. Just
and I'm actually
go.
a pantser too, but I just knew that we couldn't really pants this project as much as maybe we do normally.
Yeah, but your way works so well, because I have never finished a first draft in a month. I think we did it in a month.
Yeah, it was pretty
That's what we
quick.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, that's how Heather, so I'm like kind of watching you do it. And then I'm like, okay, for my future project, I'm going to try to do the same. Like, instead of just, just write whatever comes to me, because I have all these thoughts, all these ideas coming all at once, and it's impossible. And so I thought doing it your way is a great way to do it.
Well, and I think every book is a little bit different. Like some books I've written fast, other books it does take a lot longer. But I felt like we kind of already had sort of at least the story arc because of the original book, which you had already read and been a beta reader and editor for me. And then we were taking the character of Tian Fu Wu, making her a main character. And so really it was kind of new. That part was new research, not like 100% new research for me, because I knew basically what she had gone through, but you found a lot of tidbits on her that I hadn't known. And then it was, okay, how are we going to write her chapters? And so that was really the part that was new for me. And also, I don't know, I thought it was just really fun to work with a co-author, because sometimes when you're just in your head all the time,
Right.
the story doesn't feel like 100% real. Like if I was reading a historical novel, it just leaps off the page. But when you're writing it, you just feel like it's kind of judgery, and you're just putting in your time every day and your hours every day. But when you're working with a co-author and they send you a chapter back, you're like, wow, it just really just pops off the page, and you think this is really cool. And then it just makes you more excited to, oh yeah, okay, so now she put this in the chapter, so then in my chapter, make sure I have this, and then we would go back and forth and edit each other, and that was super helpful too, for you to like put in your notes, or me put in, we'd go back and forth on our notes.
Right, exactly. And one of the fun things that, because I never written a historical novel before, and so I really had to be careful not to make the characters' voices too modern, right? So I remember while I was still drafting the first draft, I kept telling myself, don't use the word okay, because back then they didn't say okay. Well, in so many scenes, I was almost there. I was almost
Yeah.
going to type, okay, let's go, or okay, let's do this. And then I thought, no, they wouldn't have used that word okay because it wasn't invented yet. Right. And
Right.
so I just found that was really fun. Writing historical novel that we have to always be careful, but then it's fun too, because now I can look back and say, oh, okay, I'm a very careful person. I'm a very thoughtful writer.
Right. Yeah. And
You
you do
know?
have to, and sometimes it's even when you're drafting,
Mhm.
you don't realize you're writing a cliche or like a modern
Mhm.
phrase. And then as you go back through it, you have to just tell your mind, okay, look for anything that is too modern
Right.
or just even the way a person would think. Because back then,
Mhm.
women didn't even have the right to vote. And
Mhm.
and so maybe their experiences aren't necessarily how we would react today, and how would they react back then to a situation. So it's not only
Exactly.
like the word choices, but also maybe their thinking patterns, or what
Mhm.
would make them upset, or what would make them happy.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree 100%. So,
Yeah,
and
but it's
overall,
super
it's just
fun.
a really great experience working with you on this project. And now I'm just
I
really excited
know.
that we
I
have the
told you
art.
I was too. So I haven't even okay, this is what I've done so far. I read the table of contents because I was so proud of them, which sounds silly. But I remember when we were trying to decide little subheadings or titles for each chapter. And I
Right,
have
right.
never done that in any book I've written before.
Oh,
I've sometimes put the name of a character, or I've put like a quote, like maybe if I've written something that's religious, maybe a scripture quote, or another historical novel, like something from the history. But I've never had um anyway, I just love like chapter 8 is called City of Fog. And I
right.
just love that little added touch, which you find in a lot of middle grade or young adult novels. But I've never done it myself. So I read the table of contents, and we've actually done another edit on that will be in the final version. So I'm nervous to like even read this, because I'm like, well, that wasn't edited, and then I get all like, well, anyway, that like I don't want to read the version that is already an old version.
Exactly. And Heather, I know that we're kind of short on time, but do you mind just sharing real quick with our audience how, because the nature of the story involves human trafficking, and
Mhm.
how these Chinese women, Chinese girls sold into slavery, they were brought to San Francisco's Chinatown, and some of these women and girls were forced into prostitution. But because we're writing this young readers edition, and our target audience are the readers are a little younger, and so how did you, during your writing process, how did you tailor the narrative to fit the audience, when you mention sensitive topics, for
Mhm.
example, prostitution, that kind of things? How did you do
Yeah,
it?
that's a very, very good point, because I think we're gonna get that question a lot, is how did you take Paper Daughters, which is a very serious subject of
Mhm.
human trafficking and sex
Right.
trafficking. How did you make that, you know, age appropriate for younger readers? And and basically we took the character Tian Fu Wu, who is in the original version, but we back up. We go to when she was a 6-year-old little girl, and she was sold by her father to pay gambling debt. And she was never in prostitution or in a brothel. So her experience actually was being a domestic slave. And so we follow her story as she's kind of sold to different houses, and has to work, has to be a babysitter, and clean kitchens and clean dining rooms. And so we're following her. And obviously she sees courtesans, and but from her 6-year-old point of view, she doesn't necessarily understand all that's going on. So an adult reading it would say, oh, I know what's going on because I know what a brothel is. But we also didn't want to dumb it down too much. And so So you will see some mentions, but there's nothing really described because we're reading from Tian Fu Wu's point of view. We do have Donaldina's Cameron point of view in there. Her scenes that she interacts with Tian Fu are altered a lot from the original version. You really see the development of their relationship is almost like a mother-child relationship. Dolly lost her mother as a young girl, and Tian Fu Wu has now lost her entire family. So the historical part of their story is they become very close friends. They end up working together their entire lives at the mission home. They retire around the same time together. And in fact, Tian Fu Wu was at the hospital when Dolly passed away. So they remain very close friends. And so it's kind of it was kind of a neat way. This book brings out that friendship and that support, where if you did read the original version of the book, they butted heads a lot. Tian Fu Wu did not like Dolly at all for a few years at least, until one of Dolly's favorite staff, or actually Tian Fu's one of her favorite staff members, passed away, and Tian saw how much Dolly grieved over that loss as well. And that's when they finally started to kind of bond. And you see that in the original book. And so that all is brought out a lot more in this young reader's version.
That's wonderful. So I just think overall, this whole story is amazing. And when I first read your manuscript years ago, The Paper Daughters of Chinatown, when I read it, I was really surprised how nobody talked about the story, right? It's like it wasn't really well-known history. I read it, I'm like, oh, I didn't know anything about Donaldina Cameron. I didn't know anything about Tian Fu. I didn't know all the rescue missions they went on. No idea. And then I started talking to some American-born Chinese people who were born and raised in San Francisco area. They did not know. They didn't know. And so I'm like, wow, somebody has to tell this story, right? But you did. And now I'm glad that with the young adult edition coming out, more people will be able to read about it. Like younger readers will read and know about the heroic acts and rescue missions that Donaldina Cameron and Tian Fu did, and all the other staff members at the Cameron house. At the time, it's not called the Cameron house, the mission home. You know, all those kind-hearted people who work so hard to save lives. I'm like, this story needs to be told, and more people need to know. So I'm glad the book
I feel so lucky that we can bring it to younger readers as well, because it's an important topic. We know human trafficking is a plague today. It's terrible. It's out there, and there are groups out there that are doing a lot of work, and just to be aware in our community and to be aware of those around us and what their struggles are is important.